Hello and welcome to From Mrs. to Me, a podcast where you'll be inspired by courageous stories of strength and resilience told by women just like you who have been through the upheaval of divorce. This is their journey from Mrs. to Me, finding their true identity and creating a bold, beautiful life. I'm Crissy Freeman and I'm your host, a certified life coach and divorced mother of two. Join me each week as we explore real stories of divorce and what it takes to transform and live in alignment with the real you. Hello, and welcome to another episode of From Mrs. to Me. I'm your host, Crissy Freeman, and I'm so excited to share my next guest, Laura Ard, with you, who was gracious enough to actually interview me on her podcast, which is called The Journey Within You, where she shares women's stories of hope and resilience. So in addition to being a podcast host and creator, she is a devoted mom, loving wife, and proud grandmother of 13 grandchildren, which is so amazing, and one great-grandson. Laura has embraced her calling as a life coach, dedicated mission to helping women reclaim their voice and healing through Christ after enduring seasons of abuse, both mental and physical. With a passion for promoting positive and impactful health journeys, Laura leads a health and wellness business that supports women in becoming their best selves. She believes in the power of transformation. You're in the right place for that. Encouraging others to become the best version that God created them to be. I feel so blessed to have you join us today. Welcome, Laura.
Crissy, I'm just so thankful that we have met and have this opportunity to swap, and be on each other's podcasts. What a platform for us to use our voices, right? So I am here to share my story. We all have a story. And that's something that I proclaim in my podcast. We all have a story and it's worth sharing. And so many times I held back my story. I didn't want people to know my story. I had a great childhood. Grew up in I'm a preacher's kid. I grew up in a home of love, Christ-centered, well taken care of, adoptive brother, so small family. But the biggest draw probably in my childhood was the moving. We moved a lot. And the last move I remember is moving to Tampa, Florida. And this is at 13, at the age of a teenager, not wanting to move anymore, right? It's time for stability. And I had left a place that I didn't want to leave. And so just trying to adjust. And my family was great at getting us, settled and adjusted in the new location. But it was a struggle. And I didn't like school, didn't want to go to school, but I went and I found every avenue in school to do different. I was in chorus. I did the work thing where you could leave school, not have to be at school. And that was working. But then I still just was not liking school. And I met a guy. That happens, right?
Yes, it does.
And this guy was 7 years older than me. And this is when I'm like 15, 16. I was probably getting to be 16. But everybody loved him. My family loved him. He was the great guy. And I talked to my dad and I said, Dad, I'm in my 12th year. I don't want to finish the school. I don't like it. Please let me take my GED, get on with life. We know everything at 16, right? And so he agreed. He said, okay. And I was surprised because my dad is a school. He got his master's. He's doctorate. He's school. I don't have that in me. I just never did. And so I got out, went to the classes, took my GED. Meanwhile, life is progressing with the boy. I get engaged. We start planning wedding. And my GED comes back and I failed it by 1 point. 1 point. And I'm like, really? This is going to be so hard to tell my dad because he allowed this. And I know that was hard for him. But I did, and I kept promising, I'll take it again. I'll take it again. I'll take it. Life happens. Too much happening. We're getting married. We're going to have, all the wedding. My mom's a seamstress. My mom bakes cakes. So she did my dress. She made the cake. We got married in the backyard of my grandmother. The perfect picture, right? All beautiful. Roses, the whole thing, like it just excited, getting married. And again, here I am thinking I know it all. I'm going to be a wife. I can do this. I can work full time. He works full time. It's going to be beautiful. And then things started happening. And I was like, oh, what? I saw some hints of things before, but I excused them away because we're nervous, right? We're changing. I think we're just nervous. Some things about him that I was seeing. And we get married and things started changing pretty quickly. And I'm like, who is this guy? This isn't my kind, loving, do it all for everybody kind of guy. He's flipping out over the simplest things, like going to the grocery store and I come home with one extra item and I get locked out of the house. Are you serious? And I'm like, why is he doing these things? And I kept thinking, it's me. I got to change. I got to do something different. I got to make this better. I'm married for life, and I even called my dad. I'm like, Dad, can you come over and talk to us? I don't know what's happening. It's just real strange. He gets real angry and I'm not seeing that side of him. And Dad would come and all the great things would be said and he would make the promises and I'm taking care of your daughter and we're all good. And we lived in a 10 by 80, I think it was about 10 by 80 trailer. Couldn't run air condition if you dare turned it on without his permission. Just crazy, simple, everyday movement things. He had to have control. And I started seeing that I couldn't do things without permission. I had to ask. And slowly I started, and this is something I haven't shared a long time, and it's just something that started hitting me this week, was I learned to lie. I started living a life of lies. I started covering up every aspect of our marriage. We're happy. We're good. We're a great couple. And
so that the outside world would think
everything looked good.
Everything was fine. I know that story well.
I didn't want anybody to know that I was failing at my marriage, me failing at the marriage, because we take the blame. As a woman, I think we take it on more. I can't speak for all men, but I do. I think we start taking on that package of, I got to do better. I got to change this. I'm going to make it work. We lived in Tampa, Florida. His family was from Connecticut, and he wanted to move back home. Well, I found out I was pregnant, which I was never going to get pregnant. I had babysat all the kids I ever wanted in my life, and I didn't think I needed children. I just didn't want children, but God saw different. I got pregnant. And so at 6 months, we packed up and moved to Connecticut. And I'm thinking, this will be good. He'll be around his family. His life will feel better. He won't feel like a fish out of water. It'll be great. It was the worst move ever, because once we got there, I was isolated. I stayed in my apartment. We're on his parents' property, or in the back apartment. His mom was wonderful. His family was wonderful. But I had nobody. And he knew that. He had so much control over me that I had nowhere to be around people, not make friends. If I was with anybody, it was with him and with family. We were always together. I couldn't go somewhere by myself. If I was, I had to let him know when I was leaving. I had to let him know when I was on my way back. I had to show where I was. It was like, what is this? Why? What? Do you not trust me? I found ugly magazines around, and I'm like, the yucky, ugly magazines.
Yes.
And I'm asking, why do we have to have these? You have me. And so I put them in the dump. Oh, he got so angry. He never touched me, but he threw things at me, and he talked to me in a way that was so degrading of a human that all started packing in my brain. You're unworthy.
That's the mental abuse,
you're
right?
Stupid. You don't belong. Yep. Yeah. And then the baby's coming. So all the excitement of the baby, and I'm having a boy, and I was so excited to have a boy. Had him. Things were going pretty well. And the next thing I know, he's taken that control and anger out towards my son as a baby. I mean, he would get ugly. And I'm like, you can't do this. He's a baby. He doesn't understand that. Like, he wouldn't go to sleep on time, or he wouldn't do this on time. And that started to grow, the abuse towards him. Again, here I am lying, hiding, not sharing, not reaching out to anyone out of fear, of shame, all the things. And so I started trying to think of ways, we got to move back home. I got to get back in Georgia. I got to be near my family because things aren't working out so well. And I don't want to be here. I tried to leave one time. I packed my son up, made the flight plans, got myself out of there, came home, and I thought I was done, But what happens? He starts talking. He starts promising. He starts sharing. He's like, I'm going to do better. We'll do this, this, and this. I come back. My mom is fanatic, mad, upset. You're going to get hurt. I go back. What do? I get pregnant. It fixes everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I'm having a girl. What a blessing. A boy and a girl. This man provided, this man did all the things that everybody on the outside world sees as good, but they weren't seeing in my home. They weren't seeing what we were going through. And he was sick. He was sick. He's bipolar. He had issues, but he did not want to address those issues. And we tried one time. He didn't take the medicine, though. He wouldn't stay on it. So there was never any fix. We moved back to Georgia. We move in with my parents till we can get a home. That was awful. He showed himself. And I could not wait to get out of the house because then I was so embarrassed that my parents are finally seeing the real, true stuff, And we get out, we find a place, and the abuse on my son got worse. He was physically abusing him. And I finally had to reach out. I asked for help. And they sent him to anger management. Like, that's going to fix everything.
When you say they sent him to anger management?
The system. I'll just use the word system because I went to them, I went to my local system to ask for help. And school system saw the hand marks around his neck. And instead of removing us from that problem, they just said anger management classes. And he attends those, check the box. He's great. I even brought in godly counseling into our home because maybe this is a step I'm missing. Maybe I need to do this. I mean, we're involved in our church. We're teaching Sunday school. We're having everybody at our house like we are the perfect family. He never acted out in front of anybody. He looked loving. He was always doing, cooking, cleaning, doing all the things, And finally, one afternoon after church, a simple thing happened. And it was always something very simple. I said, you know what? I think I'm going to sell Tupperware. I think it'll be fun. I don't have to go and do parties anymore. They had started the thing where you could do catalog orders. It'd give me a little income, something fun to do. He went berserk. I didn't ask permission. I was doing something out of what he thinks I should do. And it was awful. And I thought, that's it. I have to get out of this. This is not what God intended for a marriage. Not. And I've carried on 15 years too long. And so I made the progress of moving my stuff out into my daughter's bedroom until I could figure out how was I getting out of here, because I had no money. He had everything. Everything was his. Nothing belonged to me in that home.
And he wanted it that way, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's the control.
It was not ours. It was his. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? How am I going to get out of here? And so, of course, my mom and dad, I'm like, I have to leave. I feel like a crumbled up piece of paper, worthless. And my children don't deserve this as a mother or as a family. I have to get out. And so they welcomed me. I got us out. My son, what did you think he chose? To stay.
To stay with his dad.
Yeah. And he was at the age he could decide that. He was 5th grade. The courts would allow it. Funny thing again, the system, knowing what's happening, they allow it.
Even with the abuse.
Yeah.
Wow.
And kids do that. They cling to their abuser because they want to show them they can be good. They will do good. They will follow him and do right. But his dad had also filled his brain that I was the problem. I was having an affair. I was doing the things. And I couldn't battle that. I was too weak in my own self to try to even battle him. And I wasn't having an affair. I was not doing those things. But I told my son, I said, I love you. And you have to make this choice. And I'm not going to try to change you in that. And so we moved out. I got us an apartment. The day of the divorce, though, finally went through. I get a call from my old neighbor. And she's like, Laura, your house is empty and your dog is in the backyard. I'm like, what? We just literally signed papers for agreement of visitation and all the things. And he took off to Connecticut and didn't tell us.
And left the dog behind.
And luckily I found a farm that came immediately and got the dog. They were happy. I was thankful that happened so quickly. I couldn't bring the dog. I had an apartment. I couldn't go get the dog. And my son called me that night, like, Mom, we're in Connecticut. And I'm like, what? Okay. And now I've got to rearrange all that, and doing. It took me over 2 years to find myself again, to realize what had happened was not all my fault. It takes two. I'm not going to take away some of mine because I stayed in it so long. And what I want women to know, don't keep giving in. Don't keep covering up with lies. I hate liars. Oh, I discuss liars. I don't like lying. But here I was number one big time liar, in all things. I covered up so much stuff that I didn't even know what was true anymore.
I think for anyone in this situation, right, it's survival mode, because there's the fear of being a mom, first of all, and breaking up the family, right? And what is that going to look like?
Yeah.
There's the financial insecurity because all of that has been taken away from you and you have nothing from a financial resource perspective. And then you've been so isolated too. You have your family, but other than that, who do you have to help you through this journey? And so I wanted to just ask you, you talked about it took you 2 years to heal. What on this podcast, I like to talk a lot about that, healing journey to discovery. And it's different for everybody, but for somebody who's been in this kind of a situation like you, with that, both physical in terms of your son abuse and mental abuse, what did that healing journey look like for you?
Wow. Because I wish I knew now what I know now back then, because it would have been a whole different way. But I have to say, I did have a job. I finally had gotten one. I just did it. He didn't like it. I did it. But it was a job that fell into my lap working for an attorney that did Social Security disability. But this woman took me under her wing because she knew I couldn't hide my lies from her. An attorney, go figure.
Isn't that interesting?
I couldn't hide them. And she knew that I was struggling in my own personal life. And when that happened and I fell into the divorce and all was happening, she took care of me. I got very sick and I was out for 7 weeks thinking I was dying. Actually, I was diagnosed with a disorder of sarcoidosis, and I was out of work. And I'm thinking, I'm panicking. I'm not going to be able to stay in my apartment. I'm going to afford this. I can't do. She covered that. She took care of me. So having that, person, I had church family, but when the divorce happened, they thought it was something I did on a whim, and it wasn't something that had been going on for a long time. I was read out of my church. And so people didn't talk to me because I was the bad person for divorcing. Let me tell you, it took a lot of gut to divorce because my dad's a pastor, and I don't believe in divorcing just on a whim. And I was the first to divorce in our family. I had all that guilt carrying, So struggling with a daughter, too, that was rebellious when I divorced, I just sunk myself into work. I tried to make time, and I started realizing that I was working too much with a daughter on my own because it was 10-hour days, to travel, work, and come home, and then try to have her and deal with her and do the things. And so I thought, I got to change jobs. I got to find something that will work better with the schedule and more time with her and more time for myself, because I never took time for myself. And so I did find another job. It was better hours and good pay still, where I could survive and not just, feel like I'm in survival mode. But my walk with Jesus, I think, is my most healing point. I started looking in the scriptures, finding that, you are worthy. You were created by me. So don't think any less because of what you chose or what you went through. So that was my one-on-one healing, was with him. I did have family that surrounded me. I had a good church family that I got into with my dad, because being a pastor, I went back to his church. That was my saving grace of having that, to fall into and be with and supportive, that I wasn't a bad person because I had chose to divorce. I wasn't a bad person because I stayed in it so long or covered it up for our sake. And after the 2 years, I realized that I was worthy to find love, to go and seek that. And of course, I tried some dating apps, and that wasn't so cool. I didn't like it. I was very uncomfortable. And I thought, you know what, Laura? It was December, and I was kind of in the mood, like lonely feeling. And am I ever going to meet somebody? And I put an ad in the paper, online ad.
Wow.
And I said all the things about who I was and what I liked and what I was expecting. And I had 3 people answer that ad. And the first one, we met for dinner and we just had a great visit. We knew we weren't going to go any further. And the second one, I said, how about meet me at church on Sunday? And he came, and I knew right then. I knew as soon as I saw him,
Wow.
That's my guy. That is who I'm going to marry. And we had the best day ever. And it didn't end. In 3 months, we were married. And today we're married 27 years.
Incredible.
And I want that to see. That's the most important part of this story. Know that you can find love, and the right love that's meant for you in Christ. Not the seeking the love of just love and just being with someone and just, fulfilling those other needs that you have. It is Christ-centered love. And it's from a man that loves God and lives it out. I remember the first months of marriage, I was like so nervous, thinking I had to tell him my every move and ask permission and he sat me down. He's like, you don't have to do that with me. You're
what a gift.
A capable woman to make decisions, and I trust you in that. And so that's the most important part. I want people to know that don't feel like you have to be alone and stay in something so long of that fear of being alone.
Yes. And that's a big one. I'm glad you said that, because there's so many women that after divorce, it's this, or even before making that decision, it's that fear around, oh man, I'm getting older, or no one's going to want me, or, I can't do this alone. And first of all, I think we all have the strength within us to create a life that is authentic, that is in alignment with us, that feels good, where we are sort of enveloped in love. And so thank you for saying that. And I also want to just highlight real quick that what a beautiful story, because even though there was so much heartache and pain, there were some things that came out of it that you mentioned, that, this woman, that this job, your words were, this job landed in my lap. And I truly believe this. And with all the women I talk to on this show and in other forums, there are no accidents,
right?
There is a path for us, and we are being led. And if we pay attention to that, that's where we can find it. We can find the truth. And so that happened for a reason. And how beautiful. I mean, I got chills when you said that.
Yeah, and I stayed 5 years with her. I mean, it was amazing journey. And in a place that I never thought I was capable either of holding that kind of job. A paralegal. I didn't go to school for that, but she didn't want that. She said, no, I want to teach you. I want to train you. So
Oh,
it
how
was God
beautiful.
given for sure.
And,
And such a
I'll
blessing.
say that the other piece to that, Laura, is that I call it the village. It's sort of like, we don't need to do this alone. And I know that relationship, you were so isolated. And so to women out there who are going through something similar, you don't need to do this alone. There are other women going through this. There are other people out there that want to help. And so finding that support system and that village, as I call it, is so important, whether it's a church, whether it's a women's group, whether it's this woman who helped you at work. There are people out there, and it's okay to ask for help.
Right. Don't be fearful of or ashamed, of asking. And I wish back then I'd known about coaches. I mean,
yes,
I didn't know a thing until like about 5 years ago. And then 2 years ago, I went through my own healing with a healing coach, because you don't realize how much you bury down. And I call it anchored in your soul. And what anchor do you want to be holding on to? And I was holding on to some pain and stuff that I didn't know I put down there. And what kept coming up for me was the fear of being alone. And that, I didn't realize that was such a struggle. And she said, write a letter and to yourself on around this whole thing. And what I realized, even though I may physically feel like people around me being alone, I'm never alone. God is always, always with me. He never leaves me. People will, things will, but he never leaves us. And so that gave me such relief in understanding my thoughts around being alone and being able to change that thought.
Yeah. And we get stuck in so many stories, right? We get stuck in these stories of what we should and shouldn't do. Like your story of, your father was a pastor and, you were never going to leave a marriage.
Right.
I did the same thing for the opposite reason. My parents were divorced and it was toxic. And I thought, I can never do that to my kids ever.
Right.
But their experience is doesn't
yours.
have to be the same as mine. And so we do that over and over where we think that we're supposed to live things out because somebody says so.
Yeah.
And you're right. God has a different plan for all of us, and our journeys are all so different.
Yeah, it's never going to be a straight path. It's got twists and turns all the way.
Exactly. It does. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And so, one other highlight I wanted to touch on is your children. And, when a lot of women say, I'm staying for the children. And every guest I've had on here, when I've said that, has said, if you're staying for the children, it's the wrong reason.
It's the wrong reason.
Right?
It is. And that was never really my reason, because he was abusing my son. But I kept just staying because, again, divorce. I wasn't going to divorce. I was going to fix him. But my children, I have to say this, children are resilient and they are so strong. And we don't give them enough credit for all the things they know. We think, again, we're hiding things from them. They know. They see it. They feel it. They know. And so my kids are resilient and they've done well and they've done okay. My son's great. He's doing fine. He has some things he's had to work through in his head too. But now my daughter, she's still struggling. She's struggling big time. And I pray every day for her, that someone will intervene in her life to show her that she can get out of what she's feeling captive in. And that's my prayer for her. But they are resilient, and Mama, you need to let go of that fear because you need to get out and take care of yourself and your kids, and you will see what it'll do. I just don't stay in fear. And if you are in an abusive relationship, please seek help. Please seek a way out. It's not healthy. It's not going to change their past behaviors or their future behaviors unless he is a willing soul to go get help and truly get help. Not just a Band-Aid and think they're okay.
Yeah. And I feel that too, as someone who was married to an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same, you
Mm-hmm.
become this codependent where you truly think you're going to fix them. And we do not have that much control.
We don't have that power.
We do not have that much power. And
Nope.
yet, we believe we do. And we believe that, by leaving, we're going to make things worse. No,
Well,
no,
I
we're going
was
to
fearful.
actually,
I was fearful of
yeah,
leaving that he'd get really angry and do some bad things.
of
I didn't
course.
know. I didn't know what his behavior might be, but I couldn't keep worrying about that anymore. And I'm so
Yeah.
glad he gave me the strength and the courage to take the steps I did.
Yeah. And so, well, tell me a little bit. You've been through so much, and a lot of what we talk about on this show is, how you've transformed and created this new life for yourself. And a lot of people on the show have, helped other people. They've decided based on their story, this is what my new path is, and they've truly transformed their lives and the work that they do and everything that they do. So, can you share a little bit about the work that you do now with
Yeah.
others?
Oh, and I just love it because, again, it's getting an opportunity to help women and transform, let them have that transformation as well. And of course, using your story is a way to get in and help people. I had to heal again, still had to go through some stuff myself, but I started 3 years ago my own podcast. And I love that I have that platform for women to come and share their story. And Crissy, I've had women for the very first time telling their story. They were brave and they told their story. And they were nervous because they were like, now everybody's going to know. And I said, that's okay. You did it. And now you're helping someone else to be brave and do that as well. And so the Lord has opened doors for me to get my life coach certification. And then I was able to start, actually this week, I'm starting the 180 method, which is a way of healing through Christ. And we always 360 stuff. And where does that take you? Right back to where you started from. And so we're going to 180. We're going to do a different pattern. We're going to change that up. And we're going to get to the core of the healing, in your being so that God can exist in there like he should. And I also have started back in December, the Lord laid on my heart to start helping women start their podcast. And so now I have a 4-week program where you go through and we start your podcast, we launch it. I've had women sitting on a date for 2 years. They were going to do it. They're going to do it. And they're so scared. And I'm like, no, we're doing it. And so in 4 weeks, we launch. We're going full-fledged. And that has been I just get all the excitement of seeing these women lit up, sharing their story and having people come on and share in their, niche of what they want to talk about. I got a grief, one that deals with grief. She's had grief. So now that's what she focuses on. And I have one that shows you are significant, and one that is going through fertility, and she talks about that. So that has been just a huge blessing to be able to do that. Crissy, I don't want to go back out into the work field. I want to work from home. And in August, we had a big pivot with my husband's illness hit, and we had to quit working and our job because we own our own company, and we traveled all over the country doing our work. And that abruptly stopped in August, and I had to pivot. And I had to really lean in and ask God's guidance and what to do, because I'm like, do I go back out and work, or do I open up my talents, allow my talents to flow and work from home? I had buried my talents because I thought I had to be the mom, this, that, you start doing all the other titles. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now. It's just letting my talents flow and help women and just embrace what God has me doing now.
Well, I have to thank Laura because you had me as a guest on your podcast. And again,
Yes.
talking about no accident, there are no accidents.
Exactly.
I found you on this platform, and I read about your podcast, and I had really been holding back on telling my full story. I had told bits and pieces, but I had never told the full story. And it was exactly what you said. It was sort of like the secret that I didn't really fully want to share or felt like I couldn't share.
Yeah.
And how it was so powerful to be on your show and to share that full story.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I said to my partner, I said, oh my goodness, like I'm ready to tell my story on my podcast.
Oh,
And I hadn't done that yet. And so I recorded an episode
Way to go.
after I was on your show. And I'm like, and you released that for me. And so I have to thank you for that.
You're so welcome, because that's what I learned in myself. If I'm not going to tell my story, how can I teach women to use their voice?
Yeah.
I have to tell it. I have to share it. And yeah, it's painful sometimes. And yeah, I don't want everybody to know all the, you don't have to go so deep in some details, you know, but, and the things of, people need to know, you need to tell it. You need to share it, because there's women out there struggling right now in an alcoholic relationship, and they think they can stay there and fix this person, and they will stay until it gets really ugly. And then what? They're broken worse than they were in the beginning, and it's harder to heal each time. And so I want women to see that there is light for them. They can shine their light. They can be the light in this world and not be in the dark and hidden and tell lies like I did.
Yeah. And it's so I love the work you're doing. So thank you for doing that, and continue to do that, because you are touching so many lives in what you are doing. And I know that's what you're meant to do. So,
thank you.
And for those of you that are listening, you will find Laura's information in the show notes on how to connect with her if you would like to, and continue listening to her podcast or doing any work with her going forward. So thank you, Laura, for being here. This was such a beautiful conversation. And for those of you out there, just want to remind you that you can join the From Mrs. to Me community on Facebook at From Mrs. to Me, Rediscovering You After Divorce. And as I always say, you can't pour from an empty cup. So keep doing that inner work and letting your light shine. And I'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed another episode of From Mrs. to Me, real life stories of real women and their journey of transformation after divorce. I'm Crissy Freeman, and if you like this episode, please drop a review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Do you have a story to share? Are you ready to inspire other women on their journey through divorce? If so, find me on Instagram at From Mrs. to Me. For more tools and resources on creating your path to transformation after divorce, follow my community on Facebook, From Mrs. to Me, Rediscovering You After Divorce.